Good morning, friends. Good morning, and welcome to another week. Whew. It is Monday, April 25th. April's almost gone, which is wild. But good morning, good morning to you. And this is also another episode of PB Reads the Bible. I'm PB. I'm Pastor Brian, the pastor here at Christ United Methodist Church in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. And thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me. Today is episode 21 on our journey through the Gospel of John. So we're getting there, friends. We are on the last third, perhaps, of chapter 18, and we'll be doing the first half of chapter 9. We stopped on Thursday last week. We stopped at chapter 18, verse 27, and we're going to be picking up from there with chapter 18, verse 28, and we're going to go through chapter 19, verse 16. 16a, we're going to do the first half of A, which will sound odd, perhaps, and we'll probably have to reread the first part of 16 when we restart tomorrow, but that truly ends this section, this scene. Actually, it's made up of a number of scenes, but that's okay, rather than starting the next scene. So go ahead and check in. Let me know that you're there. I see that we have a number of people watching so far. Oh, there comes another one. It's good to have you folks with me. It's good for us to be together. Let's see how pleasant it is. Good morning, Marcia, present. Good to be here. Good to have you here, Joe. Good to be together. Good morning, John. Good to see you with us this morning as well. That's great. I think our question for today will still be from the one from the other day. How is it with your soul? It's a good question to ask ourselves on a daily basis. It's a good question to ask ourselves on a daily basis, as Paul writes. Let us work on our salvation with fear and trembling. Fear being awe, with awe, not horror movie fear, but awe, amazement at God and at everything that God does for us. And so work on our salvation in that way, very carefully. So it's good to think about the condition of our soul. Yes, I do. Somebody said it is well, my soul. It's a great song. I love that song. That's a great attitude to have. Lid off, because I know it's going to drip on me if I don't. I have a tendency to do that on me. All right, so that's enough prefaces and stuff like that. Let me just take a quick gander at the calendar here. Nope, nothing taking place this week that will affect our daily get-togethers. I'm skipping a meeting right now in order to be with you instead. Good morning, Cheryl. Good morning, Colleen. But we have this whole week. We'll be able to go live all 4 days, Monday through Thursday. And there's a chance we'll get through everything, but I doubt it. We'll probably be going into next week for at least a day or two. I haven't planned it out. I have to take a look at the rest of these sections, to these last several chapters, to see what's going on. And since we're going to be talking about one or two of these in worship over the next few weeks, you folks might be getting a little preview, a teaser as far as so far. So you might say to what the sermons will be like on those days. Woo, woo. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to be starting from chapter 18, verse 28. Before we do, a couple things to take note, a couple of things background on this. First of all, a reminder of why I stopped where I did, what happened just before that. just before that, Jesus was before Annas. And it says that Annas questioned him, but to show how powerless Annas really was, John doesn't have him even speak. We're told that he questions Jesus. Jesus speaks and testifies to the truth. And the guard slaps him, and Jesus says, "Hey, when did I say that wasn't true?" Right? That kind of thing. And then it says that they sent him sending him to Caiaphas, and we ended it there. Now this next piece, it says that they took him from. John doesn't go into details at all about what happened in front of Caiaphas. Again, I would say for two reasons. One, to once again show the powerlessness of Caiaphas, of the Jews, the religious leaders of the time, that they had no power. Nobody had any power. Truly, everything was under Jesus's control. He was in charge of the whole thing. Everything was taking place according to his time. But also, there was no reason for him to go before Caiaphas. There was no reason for us to have a trial scene before Caiaphas or before the Sanhedrin, because that already took place. They had already sentenced him to death back in chapter 11 or 12, whatever it was. They already sentenced him to death. So there's no need to have another trial. It would be anticlimactic and pointless. So where does he go from there? We're going to see that he goes before Pilate. That is the more important thing for John. So this whole section here today, 1828 through 1916, is Jesus's trial before Pilate. It's actually made up of 7 scenes. We're going to see a whole bunch of different scenes, and it's like a split stage. It's very dramatic. It would be described as a split stage. If you've ever watched a play, and they light up half the stage, and there's a set there, and then they light up the other half of the stage, and there's a set there. That's a split stage, and that's really what's taking place in this. It's a drama, and it goes from outside to inside to outside to inside to outside to inside to, yes, outside. And it's almost comical because of the wording, the language. Pilate's the one that keeps moving. Pilate is the one that keeps going from outside to inside, outside to inside. And he's the governor. We're supposed to think of him as being so powerful and stuff like that. But he's being forced to go to be this almost comic situation of moving inside and outside. And so he's like running from one side of the stage to the other, if we keep that stage and drama metaphor. Now, we should know some things about Pilate and keep those in mind as we're reading John. Otherwise, reading this passage from John, otherwise we're going to be influenced into thinking something different is going on and thinking something different about him, especially if we think about the synoptic gospels. We don't want to read John through the lens of the synoptic gospels. So try to forget what you read in Matthew and Luke in particular about the scene before Pilate. Those two in particular, Matthew has Pilate washing his hands, and his wife sends him a message, "You have nothing to do with this man," and so he's looking for a way to free him. Matthew and Luke in particular are emphasizing that Pilate didn't want to do this. That Pilate was trying to find a way to release Jesus. If we have that in mind and read this with those thoughts in our mind, we're going to think that Pilate is doing the same thing here, and he's not. That's not how Pilate would have acted. Biblical scholars look at those passages from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and especially Mark, Matthew, and Luke. They look at those and read those as a Christian apologetic for Rome, for Rome, in defense of Rome. An apology in this case isn't a statement of regret. It's a statement in defense of. So they wrote those pieces to defend Rome and Rome's actions and Pilate's actions in this, saying that he really didn't want to do it. But let's not have that in mind, because John is more fitting with what we know about the historical person, Pilate. So Pilate was a real person, and he was governor of that section of Judea in the 20s and 30s, AD, like 26 to 36 or something like that. Don't remember the exact dates. Don't hold me to that. What we do know about him from other documents, from other historical things, including from a man named Josephus, who wrote a lot about a lot of the history from that time period. Pilate was a nasty person, very mean, very violent, just not a nice guy, and he really didn't like the Jews. So, thinking about that personage will affect how we read this passage. Okay, so remember that about Pilate. So it's very comical and almost irony that John has him, running in and out, going in and out of these places, inside and outside, to deal with things. Let's get to the scripture though. And I'm probably gonna have to stop a lot because there's a lot in here. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. You might have a footnote saying the Praetorium. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. Pause. Thought they already ate the Passover, you might be asking. Well, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they did have the Passover meal the night before. And as you know, that the Passover and this takes place on the Seder meal, and this takes place on the day of Passover, the first day of Passover. For John's chronology, John's timeline is a little bit different. John backs it up one day and says that this actually takes place on the day of preparation for the Passover. That's important. It's important for a couple different reasons. One of which is the very important task that the Jews would have to do on the day of preparation, and that is to slaughter the lamb for their Seder meal, the sacrificial lamb. The lamb would be sacrificed on the day of preparation. Okay, and so that's important. That's why John perhaps changes the chronology. That's why he has everything take place on the day of preparation. Now, so it says there that they would, to avoid ritual defilement, and that's why they didn't go into the headquarters. It's interesting. It's intriguing. It doesn't exactly say why. Why? So one of the presumptions, one of the assumptions, one of the thoughts is that it was possible due to the way Gentiles handled corpses, handled dead bodies, as opposed to the way Jews handled dead bodies. There was the possibility that they would be corrupted by going into the building. They might come in contact with someone or something that had been defiled by a corpse, and which would have been in Leviticus or Deuteronomy, a rule that said you could not then participate in the Passover. And what you could do, though, is wait 30 days and then celebrate the Passover a month later. That was a permissible option. But so it's so humorous that they're so concerned about this rule, that they might not be defiled, and yet all the actions that they're taking and doing belie their piety. But that also sets up the very next line. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." Pause. And we should read that very contemptuously and very mockingly. Pilate is kind of, I mean, he already knows the rule that Jews aren't supposed to be, because Rome is the only one that's supposed to be able to kill people. And they can't do it without Pilate's approval. So Pilate is being very, very mocking and very contemptuous of them, and probably emphasizing your law. The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." Technically, they would have been by stoning. That would have been an exception, by stoning, because of the heresy. But that's not what they wanted. They'd already tried that a couple different times, right? And it didn't work. So now they want something else. Continuing, this was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Period. Pause. As far as being lifted up, like Moses lifted the snake. When I am lifted up, that would not be stoning. Continuing, then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Again, mocking tone. Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pause. Love how John handles this, how the author of John handles this. When I say John, I just mean the author. We don't know his name. I love how he handles this. He completely turns everything around. Jesus doesn't answer Pilate's question. He answers his question with a question. Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me? Pilate answered. Pilate replied very mockingly, very contemptuously, "I am not a Jew, am I?" Pause. That includes in the Greek that word may, M-E, which I believe is pronounced may, which would indicate an expected negative reply, But there's irony here, because we're going to see, because of Pilate's actions, he does become a Jew, as in one of those like religious leaders, a person who does not believe in Jesus, and that Jesus is God incarnate, and that through Jesus we can see God. We're going to see that he doesn't believe that. So, in effect, he does become a Jew. So it's like a self-fulfilling thing at that point. Continuing, your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not from this world. Pause. I should have said this earlier. I had someone ask me, boy, you sounded like you're really coming down on the NRSV the other day about the translation and how wrong it was. And what translation should I use? I'm sorry if I gave that impression. There is no perfect translation. I like the NRSV. I think it's one of the best translations you can use. It's very literal. I also like the CEB, the Common English Bible, because it's so easy to read and it's very contemporary language. And the NIV is also good. There's always going to be words that just can't be translated perfectly. And so when they're doing a translation, they do it not by individual. It's not usually an individual translation. They do it by committee, by a group of people. And so sometimes they have to kind of come to a consensus, an agreement on things. Because in Greek, the word can mean 5, 6, 7 different things. And they pick one. And sometimes they don't pick what others might say would be the right word. Okay, so when I'm giving you these things and I'm saying it's wrong, I could be the one that's wrong, of course, too. But looking at the context and all that kind of stuff can help us understand perhaps a better meaning and better understanding of what was actually being said. So all that being said, I like the NRSV. I think it's a great translation. It's very literal, so sometimes it's a little tricky to read. It's not as perhaps poetic or flowing as the CEB or the NIV, because the two of them are what are called dynamic equivalents. What's that mean? It means they're mostly word-for-word translations, but they add some words and change structure in order to make the sentences and paragraphs and flow better, so that it's easy, so that it sounds better when we're reading it. Okay, so there's the difference. So all that being said, here's another place where quite possibly the NIV and the NRSV, both of them, picked the wrong word. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world." Because the word kingdom might make us think of place, of location. It might be better for us to understand it as kingship or reign. Okay, so rather than a place, it's more the the idea, the position, rather than the location. So I'm going to change it to kingship just so we can hear that difference and change what you see in your head, perhaps. Jesus answered, "My kingship is not from this world. If my kingship were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingship is not from here." Pause. So you get that difference between kingship and kingdom. Position rather than location. Position, you get it. I'm sure you get it. Now it's interesting. The word that's translated followers, and it's not an incorrect translation. Followers is good, but it's also the word used that's translated to officers when talking about the temple police and talking about their officers, the Jewish leaders' officers. So we're getting like that. My police, my squad would be fighting to keep me. My police officers would be fighting. That's interesting. I thought. Continuing, 37. Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" Pause. So that's a long, 37 is a fairly long sentence, fairly long verse. Pilate asks him, "So you are a king?" And he says, "You say that I am a king." And it is, Jesus does not say that he is a king. So in this case, the NIV gets it wrong, because the NIV says, "You are right in saying I am a king." That's not the context. That's not the Greek. You say that I'm a king. Jesus doesn't have that, or doesn't want to talk about that, right? That's not the point. That's not the point. I came into the world to testify to the truth. There's that word, that expression again, as far as testifying to the truth. We see in this, again, echoes back to earlier passages when John talked about this. This is one of those things that John kept coming back to again and again. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. An echo to chapter 10 when Jesus talked about being the good shepherd and my sheep. That's what we're told. That's what he wants us to hear. That's what he wants us to remember. That's what he wants us to think here. Because what does the good shepherd do? The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. So without saying it, he says it. And they listen to my voice And what does Pilate say? What is truth? He's placing himself with the Jews right here because he's not getting what Jesus is saying. He's not picking up what Jesus is laying down. Jesus just said, I came to tell you about the truth. And the people who belong to the truth listen to my voice. And Pilate can't hear Jesus's voice. He doesn't listen to the voice. After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again. Pilate on the move, got to go to the other side of the stage, and told them, and don't read this as Pilate looking for a way to get out or anything like that. He's playing with them. He's playing with the Jews. I find no case against him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews? They shouted in reply, not this man, but Barabbas. Now, Barabbas was a bandit. Pause. So the other Gospels also have this idea of Barabbas being released in place of Jesus. Outside of Scripture, outside of the Gospels, we have no evidence of this Passover tradition of releasing a criminal. There's no proof that it was something that took place, but it's in here, so we'll deal with it as it is for sure. If it was that this tradition, then Pilate was bound kind of by law to follow through on this tradition, on this tradition. Now, we're told, John doesn't tell us specifically much about Barabbas. He only says that he was a bandit. The other Gospels say something a little bit different. They say that they go into a little bit more detail. This is a much briefer version of the story, and John moves it. John moves this. In the other Gospels, this takes place much closer to the end, but here it's moved into the middle of the story. It's moved into the middle of the story instead. And that there's reasons for that. Possibly anyway, one of those reasons is that John is pointing out that Pilate has already made his decision. He does plan on executing Jesus, but he's just continuing to play around with the Jews, with the crowd, with the Jews. We're only told Jews. It's really not told about the crowd, right? John doesn't say that, only the Jews. So this is a much smaller group than we might think was there based on the other tellings of the story. No, so again, what did Barabbas do? Like I said, in the others, we're told more. We're told that he participated in a revolt, or at least a mini revolt, and killed a man. We're told all those kind of things. So he's a political prisoner. And the term bandit that John uses, we can certainly see that, being an equivalent. So we could just read that at the surface level and say, okay, he's this political prisoner. Which does fit. And it's interesting that their charge, especially as they go forward a little bit farther, is that, Jesus is a political prisoner, and yet they want to have released to them a political prisoner. So that's interesting. But we can also read something else when we read and hear that word bandit, all sticking with the Gospel of John. Going back to chapter 10, to when Jesus was talking about being the good shepherd, all those who have come before me were bandits who tried to steal and kill the flock. So in identifying Barabbas as a bandit, John might be, again, wanting us to remember back to that story of Jesus being the good shepherd, and Barabbas being another one of those who came only to steal and kill, who came before him. And what else is interesting, this is not, and this is not strictly John, this is all four gospels. He is named as Barabbas, which means Bar means son of, and Abbas means God. So it's very ironic that they want to release the Son of God, while at the same time they want to execute the Son of God. I always found that interesting. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. This does not happen outside. This shifts back to the inside. We know that because of the very next words. The soldiers wore a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. But this is different than the other tellings, because in the other tellings, it's a very public flogging. And it's told that maybe that would be enough. I'll have him flogged and release him, is how the synoptic gospels say it. Pilate does not say that. It's not public, so it's not to assuage their bloodlust that might be rising, and he's looking for a way to release him just by having him flogged. Typically, the flogging would take place just before following the conviction, following the decision by the judge, and just prior to the sentencing. So by having Pilate flog Jesus privately, inside, and at this location, John is saying Pilate has made his decision. He is convicting Jesus. This is all for show. Especially the rest of this thing is all for show. It's to continue to ridicule the Jews, for Pilate to play with them, and to continue to move Pilate into showing that he is a Jew. When we think about Jews being the leadership who were opposed to Jesus and wouldn't believe in him. Okay, so the soldiers wore a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. The other ones say, the other gospels say that the soldiers mocked Jesus because they were doing this. That's not their point. That's not their intention here. This is for show. They kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. We can read that as mocking, but no, they're just punishing him. They're having fun with him, so to speak. We're going to see the greater purpose in a little bit. Pilate went out again. Notice their scenes are getting shorter, it almost seems, and that's because these two scenes are coming closer and closer together, and the walls separating the two sets are starting to become permeable, to the point where we're even going to hear, although the Jews are outside, we're going to hear them inside. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pause. That's why they dressed him up inside, to bring him out as the King of the Jews. Continuing, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." Pause. I know I just paused, but so what? He doesn't say, "Here is your king." He says, "Here is the man." What is he talking about? Since John has used this expression so many times throughout it, Jesus being the Son of Man, that very eschatological term, Pilate is, although he's trying to be mocking about it, is identifying Jesus as the Son of Man. And one of the jobs of the Son of Man, this eschatological, is to be the eschatological judge. Pilate is supposed to be the judge in all of this. He's not. He's setting up Jesus as the judge. When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pause. The NRSV almost gets it wrong. They're adding that pronoun for some reason. The NIV gets it right in this point. Crucify, crucify. Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and crucify him. I find no case against him. He's mocking. He knows that they can't do it. The Jews answered him, we have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has claimed to be the Son of God. Now, when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, where are you from? Pause. That's a confusing phrase. He was more afraid than ever. John never says that Pilate is afraid. He never says that Pilate is afraid until now. But he says now he's more afraid than ever. So it can be confusing to us. He's there, and there could be a couple different things. It could be this idea that Jesus says that he's the Son of God according to these chief priests and stuff like that. So it could be that he's afraid of that, but it's probably something else. It's probably more likely that he's afraid now of like, what am I getting into kind of thing, and it's a political fear, more likely. But he enters his headquarters, brings Jesus along. He asks Jesus, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. Pause. Why? Well, because Pilate had already asked him this question, and he already answered it. He's answered it so many times that you're not going to listen. You can't hear my voice. So why should I tell you again that I have come from God? Pilate therefore said to him, do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you and power to crucify you? Jesus answered him, you would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. Pause. Once again, Jesus is John's pointing out to the reader, Pilate may not get it, probably doesn't get it, that Jesus is in control of this whole thing, and God is in control of this whole thing. Jesus, Pilate, you have no power to crucify me unless I were willing to give you that power, because I have the power, to lay down my life and to pick it up again. We've already been told that. Jesus has said that. So John is reminding us of that. Who holds the power? Jesus does. Jesus does, not Pilate. You only have power to crucify me because I'm willing to lay down my life for my sheep. I'm willing to let you have that. Therefore, the one who has handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. In the past, that expression, the one who handed me over to you, we might think back immediately based on that, because some of that same wording has been used repeatedly to identify Judas. Let's instead think about the ending of that, the greater sin. Remember, for John, the idea of what is sin? The idea of sin for John is not believing that Jesus came from God, not believing that through Jesus we can see God, not believing that Jesus is God, is sin. And so the one we might want to change that. The ones who handed me over to you are guilty of a greater sin, which would be the Jews, the leaders, that they are guilty of a greater sin. And since Pilate has already made the decision has not believed Jesus and has already made the decision to participate in this crucifixion, that he becomes guilty also of this greater sin, completely locking himself in with the Jews, aligning himself with the Jews against God. Verse 12, from then on, Pilate tried to release him. No. But the Jews cried out, if you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor. Pause. Now, they say those words, but Pilate hasn't left the room. Pilate is still inside with Jesus. So Pilate made his decision to execute. Now maybe he's going to change his mind and release the prisoners. But the walls have become, the two scenes have become two sets, stage sets. have become so close together, this wall is becoming permeable. It's like the Jews know what Pilate's thinking. They know what Pilate's thinking, and they're saying, they're outside, but they're saying, if you release this man, you're no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor. And the next phrase, when Pilate heard these words, so he was able to hear it, he brought Jesus outside. So he was still inside, sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Pause. If your Bible might have a footnote, right there, because both the NIV and the NRSV translate it as Pilate brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench. That Pilate himself sat on the judge's bench. The Greek can also be translated as seated him on the judge's bench. Now, I'm going to suggest that that's a better translation, a better choice of translation, because it fits very good with what's going on, because Pilate is mocking the Jews again. He brings him out, still dressed in his royal robe and crown, and seats him on the judge's seat, presenting him as king and judge. Boom. Unwittingly identifying him as what he actually is, king and judge, and seats him on the bench. Pilate isn't the judge. Jesus is, and he is the eschatological judge. And he sets him there on the judge's bench. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priest answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus. Now, regarding the time and the day, the time doesn't mean a whole lot. Some point out, oh, well, it was noon, that the day of preparation, that's when you're going to be starting to prepare to slaughter, sacrifice the lamb. And that's possible. That's not probably so much the importance of this. It's not so much that. It really just has more to do with the idea of him being presented as judge and king at noon on the day of preparation. He is positioning the scene to coincide with the time when regulations for the Passover feast go into effect. Not necessarily the sacrifice of the lamb, but all of the regulations for the Passover feast begin at noon. And it is at this time that the Jews are presented with their king and their judge. But what's their answer? We have no king but the emperor. We have no king but Caesar, whatever your translation says. So there's a big boom there. They are denying their king, not just Jesus, because throughout Judaism, we have no king but God is the proper statement. But they're changing it to, we have no king but Caesar. Caesar is our king. So they are pledging allegiance, professing allegiance. I'm going to stick with pledging. They're pledging allegiance to the Roman emperor. The chief priests ironically renounce their messianic hope for salvation. They're giving up their messianic hopes. And Pilate is going to be very happy with that, because and so is Rome, because he's crushing their dreams of a Messiah to save them from Rome. He's crushing him. One of the theological themes of the Passover is the celebration of God as judge and king. So by John having this all take place at noon on this day of preparation, when the Passover regulations start to take effect, there's making this huge connection between it. This theme is captured. I'm going to share this section of a hymn, of a Jewish hymn connected to the Passover. It's from the Passover liturgies. It says, "From everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Beside thee we have no king, redeemer, or savior. No liberator, deliverer, provider. None who takes pity in every time of distress and trouble. We have no king but thee." So on the day of preparation, when the regulations of Passover feast, at the exact time that the regulations of Passover feast take effect, a few hours before they're going to be having a meal and reciting these words, or words very close to them, they are denying that they have any king but Caesar. So that ends that drama. Pilate is happy. Pilate is completely now a Jew in John's understanding and expression of what a Jew is, someone who is filled with sin and won't see God through Jesus. And the stage is set for what happens next, right? So do pray, friends, that this has been beneficial to you, that you've learned something or relearned something. See, I told you, I mean, that wasn't even a full chapter, but wow, like 40 some minutes to get through all that. And we'll be picking this up again tomorrow. I pray it's been beneficial, that God has spoken to you in some way, shape, or form. As you go about your days, not just today, but every day, keep those eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open for what God is doing in your life and in the lives of those around you. When you see it, when you hear it, say, "Thank you, God," and then tell somebody about it. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed.